Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. You know, they say it's healthy for the mind to try new stuff. It's like eating broccoli, but for your brain. And since my brain is a near microscopic mass of smooth pink stuff, I think it's time I give the guy some exercise. I am beginning my own career as a writer by writing my own D&D module. It's gonna take a while, and I wouldn't hold your breath on a specific release date since it's more of a personal project, but I will say that the process has confirmed something that I was already acutely aware of. Being a writer is f***ing hard. I mean, take a look at George R.R. Martin. Poor guy said that he can't finish his books because fascism is on the rise. You can go ahead and ignore the fact that Tolkien wrote the single greatest piece of fantasy literature during World War II. That was just a fluke. The fact that George keeps getting paid to do all, combined with the fact that he's just waiting to keel over and die at this point, has nothing to do with the fact that his last release was 13 years ago. Shut up, hater. Before you start complaining, this is coming from a place of love. I just want to see the damn story finished. Suffice it to say, being both pretentious and a writer can be a disaster. Not only because you can't live with the fact that your work might not end up being the flawless masterpiece that lives in your head, but also because it can tank your D&D game. The story I have for you today stars a DM who confuses being a writer with running a D&D session. Of course, there's some overlap, but when you're playing D&D, players normally expect to, be allowed to play the game. The train's leaving the station, so get ready for some railroading. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG-Horror-Stories. Enjoy. This week's story comes from Reddit user Guy with the Bow and is titled, "It's the DM's World, we just kinda live in it." Our story begins at the end of a game of Curse of Strahd I was DMing. The campaign had lasted for almost a year, but with victory found in Barovia, our table found themselves without a campaign to play. One of the players volunteered to run a homebrew game for anyone who wanted to play, and two of us agreed to play. Session 0 comes around and we have our group. DM, the former player and DM of this campaign, Roy, playing a Forge Cleric and the only other player, and myself, playing an Inquisitive Rogue. It's admittedly a small group, but DM assures us that although the campaign will be difficult, it won't be impossible. Roy and myself are excited to begin, as DM came to Session 0 with a stack of lovingly hand-drawn maps detailing the expanses of his world, and let us decide what our goal would be. We discussed matters and decided that we wanted to play in a long-term search and rescue game to find the lost, presumably kidnapped, king of a foreign nation, with Roy being the king's son and myself being a retired knight captain and former friend of the king. The DM said this was all good, and so we made our sheets and prepared for the game, utterly oblivious to the nightmare we were about to embark on. We arrive via ship at an empty port in the nation of Durandal and start our trek east to the elven city situated in the nearby forest. Upon entry, we're narrated that thick vines grow all through the woods with red thorns a foot long each, and that touching one will turn you to stone. We, of course, take measures to avoid the thorns until we are suddenly surrounded by a wall of thorns that disappeared up into the treetops. We asked the DM to clarify, and he repeated that we are simply suddenly surrounded and can't climb out without risking turning to stone. It's at this moment an elf woman appears in a hole in the vines and demands our names. We, of course, give them and are escorted inside the city where she reveals she is the queen of all elf kind. The first NPC we meet, I remind you. She leads us into a building crafted from an ancient knotted tree, and after leading us to our rooms, tells us that we've been left gifts. An extremely strange statement given how we just met this woman and walked straight there. We examine the gifts we were given. A longsword that counted as a simple weapon, and a royal poisoner's kit. An item the DM told us explicitly out of character would be the most vital piece of equipment we would use on our journey, as the thorns outside the city were only the beginning of the vile poisons in the land. Spoilers, it will never be used again. We awoke the next day to the beautiful scene of an elven city, being blocked by the bare ass of a man perched on a branch outside our window taking a shit while grinning at us. This man was Periwinkle, and was supposed to act as our guide to the dwarven city to the north, but the DM just used him as an excuse to make juvenile and obnoxious humor, yelling and making fart noises constantly. and even going so far as to masturbate in the corner of a room once in full view of the party. We leave the Elven City and head north, following an established trade route before encountering a lookout tower with a general store situated beneath it. We asked the store owner for info on the area, and he explained that the trade routes are empty, and supplies are scarce due to a nest of a giant fire ant colony that took up residence underground, pushing back the dwarves and attacking caravans as well. We offered to try and stop the ants, given how this was session 4 and we had not rolled a single dice so far. We were absolutely chomping at the bit for some action. The shopkeeper offers assistance in the form of goods, an elven chain shirt for me, and a full set of adamantine plate for the cleric, much to our utter and complete shock as we were only level 3. We are guided to a tunnel where the ants venture from and head inside, readying ourselves for combat. And combat we receive. Kinda. I attempt to set up a series of traps using string, wire, oil, and fire flasks. But when combat began, the DM said the ants were unusually intelligent and just stepped over the traps harmlessly and beeline to us. We rolled initiative, and their first attack puts me under half health. I realized that with so many giant ants pouring out and our trap removed, we aren't winning this, and we're forced to retreat. The DM informs us that we were supposed to beat the ants to level up, but since we did not, we will be staying at level 3. We're a bit annoyed, but we got unreasonably high tier armor anyway, and the shopkeep just let us keep it, so we moved on. We make it to the next city. Well, a walled military camp they called a city, and got our first major clue to the king's whereabouts. A wizard who embodied the stoner archetype that lived in the area knew of an even more powerful wizard last seen in the Dwarven Kingdom that may know the whereabouts of the king. But to reach the king, we needed to access the Dwarven City through the same tunnels that the ants inhabit. So of course, we leave, leaving our guide behind, and make our way to the heart of the anthill. We knew that we were still certainly underleveled for it, but it was obviously where the DM wanted us to go. So we started the trek. Multiple times during this trek, we got attacked by more giant bugs that were also far above our level, who would attack us, down us, and then be gone by the time we returned to consciousness. It got tiresome fast. We made camp atop a hill with a vantage point, and in the middle of the night, the alarm spell I had cast went off. We can see from inside our tent that we were surrounded on all sides by devils who were talking loudly to each other. Roy could understand Infernal, so he translated that they were here to kidnap us and take us to their boss. We got to thinking of a plan to escape because we knew that if bugs were killing us, devils would be unbeatable. We had no time to react as the devils tore into our tent as we discussed strategy outside of character, throwing us into combat. We land no hits, and we are both downed but maintain consciousness to see the devils over us. The DM's stoner wizard pops into existence by our heads, and then notices the devils, which he dispatches instantly by blowing a dank cloud at them, which removes them from existence. The wizard restores us to full health and says he brings news that he has a new lead on the king's location. We point out that we need to eliminate the ants anyway, to which the wizard says he forgot we had to do that, crosses his eyes, wiggles his fingers, and the entire anthill disappears. Obviously, Roy and myself are flabbergasted. We ask why the hell he didn't do this long ago when the trade routes were shut down, to which he laughs and says he was too lazy to do it then. We are obviously getting exasperated with the entire situation, but the wizard said we needed to search the Underdark for the king. Before we could reply, he exhales another cloud and we open our eyes in a collapsed building somewhere underground. As soon as we step outside the building, we are ambushed by drow women riding spiders who kidnap us and take us to the Queen Grand Priestess. The QGP explains that men are below slave status in this land, but a rebellion has risen up and they have kidnapped her 3 daughters, so she wants us to go rescue them. We told her no, frustrated that our decisions have no impact, but we were told that we had no choice in the matter, and we are wrapped up in webbing and wake up again in another crumbled building. We immediately find the rebels, who we find out are slaves rising up against the queen, and they tell us where the princesses are, as well as the fact that they were actually kidnapped by a devil. Cool. Arriving at the building where we were told the princesses were, we enter, and of course, the princesses are in plain view, as is a 15-foot tall devil. The devil turns his attention to us and inquires why we're there. Roy declares that we want the princesses for the drow queen. The devil laughs at us and says no, unless we make a delivery for him. He wants us to deliver a supreme ring of curse removal to a man out in the Dwarven Kingdom. Roy loses his shit. He draws his sword, points it at the devil, and makes an IRL inspirational speech about his refusal to be a puppet to the whims of fate, as well as an oath that he'd slay the devil even if it costs his life that lasts for a couple of minutes. Man put his all into it, and I was genuinely taken aback by his sincere performance. Unfortunately, the DM was not impressed, as when he stopped, the DM said, "That was a cool speech, but I magicked it onto your finger while you were yapping." Roy says, "I remove it." "You can't. It's stuck on and will only remove itself when you find the man to deliver it to. Also, the queen can have her worthless kids back." And then he snapped his fingers, presumably returning the princesses back to the queen before disappearing himself. Roy is beside himself, clearly at the point where he looked like he'd cry at any second. We were tired and completely sick of being tossed around this story with no impact, and everyone ignoring us. We didn't want to say anything hurtful to DM because he was our mutual longtime friend, so we agreed to just grit our teeth until he finished his tale. Well, that sucked. If there's one thing that DMs should never do, it's make their players feel worthless. Now, I understand and even encourage letting your players know that they are not the biggest fish in the adventuring pond. It provides a sense of scale to the world and gives the PCs a goal to work towards. But to be like, "Hey, you know that super important thing that you specifically have been tasked to do? Yeah, there's someone out here who can do it effortlessly. We only hired you because we couldn't get a hold of that guy. How about you cry a little harder, loser?" is f***ing dumb. I mean, come on, dude. Come on. Imagine studying your whole life and paying thousands of dollars to be a cancer surgeon, only for your first surgery to end when the janitor walks into the operating room and yanks out the tumor with an ungloved fist. Yeah, I'd be reevaluating my career in medicine too. Now, one could write this off as the DM just being inexperienced or unaware of what would make his game fun for his players, but the fact that he repeats this trend constantly while taking every opportunity to rub salt in the wound tells me that Homeboy's getting off on it. Look, if you're not a pretentious dickhead and genuinely want your players to feel valued in the narrative, which is something you are all contributing to, by the way, you should take every opportunity you can to reward effort. Let's take a look at the aftermath of Roy's speech here. It's obvious to me that Roy was choosing to channel his frustration with the game's direction into something more constructive, a good in-game character moment. A good DM may have rewarded this action by shifting the situation to go into the direction that the player obviously wants it to go. Maybe the devil curses the player, and now they get to engage in a quest to remove the curse and take revenge on the devil, complete with hell-themed loot and magic items. Maybe the devil is impressed by the player's boldness and rewards them by writing up a contract to enter the devil's service for a more ambitious goal. We all know that devils love when you sign on the dotted line. What a bad DM would do is politely sit through an impactful roleplay moment, or what he lovingly refers to as yapping, before delivering a swift metaphorical kick to the dick. Congratulations! You have now cemented that player's apathy for the rest of your DM career. Enjoy your prize, prick. Next session, we find a hole where the devil stood. This hole led to a tunnel that took us, obviously, directly to the chambers of the Dwarf Queen. Because at this point, why the hell not? We tell the queen what our goal was, of course, finding the king, and she says that she knows nothing of that, but knows someone who might. A legendarily powerful wizard who was currently locked away because he was under the effect of a potent curse. Roy and I immediately realize that it's likely both the wizard spoken of by the Dark Wizard and the devil's recipient for the ring. We suppress our annoyed sighs and ask to see him. She walks us to a sealed chamber where the DM describes a man that's been locked away in countless chains with arcane runes etched onto them. As the DM describes the scene, my soul leaves my body. Taking a step back prior to this game starting, our group was playing Curse of Strahd with myself as the DM and the current DM as a player. During this game, DM was playing a drow wizard who accepted all the dark gifts of the Amber Temple at once, granting him great power but cursing him in a myriad of disgusting ways. His PC was turned evil, and the game ended with him betraying the party and becoming Lord of Barovia. So imagine my surprise when the man standing in front of us in this new campaign is none other than that same drow wizard. I can feel the storm approaching, and I'm sure Roy could as well. The ring falls off Roy's finger and he offers it up to the bound wizard. And all at once, all of his hindering curses flash away, obviously leaving the beneficial boons they came with fully intact. And he is freed from his bindings. He is, of course, eternally grateful and insists on staying with us to the conclusion of our journey, despite our own insistence that a mage as powerful as he is has better things to do. We weren't so lucky. The DMPC says he knows where the king is being held and will take us there, prompting another teleportation, this time to a city that can be described as Agrabah. We had no clue where we were on the map this time, but we also didn't care, so we went with it. DMPC says that the king is being held in the local prison, but we need to sneak in. Finally, I think, something my character is inherently good at. I tell the DM that I want to wander the bazaar inconspicuously to listen in on conversations to gather further intel, to which I'm told that I'm promptly seized by the city guards. I am floored as I demand to know why I was just arrested when all I did was walk a public street, to which the DM says matter-of-factly, "The people in this city have a distinct cultural attire that you aren't wearing, and it marks you as an outsider." I try to protest that this information was not provided to us, but he just simply narrated me getting dragged to a jailhouse and tossed in a cell. If you've been paying attention, I'm sure you can guess who my cellmate was. Say it with me, boys and girls, it's the king! Out of character, I've just about hit my limit, as never in my years of playing D&D have I ever encountered such a railroaded game before. But as soon as I identify the king, the DMPC teleports in along with Roy, leaving me to question why the DMPC didn't just teleport us to the king if that was always in his power. I point out that we need to sneak him out of the city, to which the DMPC simply teleports the whole party outside the city walls and onto a nearby roadway. Roy audibly groans, but the DM either ignored it or didn't catch it, and instead narrates a horse-drawn carriage coming down the road. I suggest we flag them down for a ride to the nearest port. The DM says the sigil on the side is familiar, because it was the royal seal from our native kingdom. Roy and myself are shocked, to say the least, as nobody from our home kingdom should have been in Durandal. But the carriage stops and the door swings open, revealing Roy's character's older brother, who was neither in his backstory nor been mentioned until this point. This older brother greets us and invites us into the carriage, where he explains that it was him that orchestrated the capture of the king, and that he simply couldn't allow any of us to return to our home because he is the rightful king now. He then gets ejected from the carriage just before the carriage fucking explodes. We all take tremendous damage, and the king is in critical condition. Roy tries to heal him, but the DM says he's too far gone. The king then names me the rightful heir to the throne. I refuse, insisting that Roy is both his son and has proven his valor, so he should be the rightful heir. As I'm talking, the king shoves another magic ring onto my character's hand, saying it marks the true king and can't be removed unless by powerful magic. And then he dies. Roy is pissed. Clearly, I'm pissed, obviously. DM is beaming like he has personally subverted every literary expectation and was the next Tolkien given flesh. This was the last session that we played, as both Roy and I explained that we had no interest in playing anymore, especially since outside of combat we rolled maybe 3 checks total. However, the game apparently didn't end, as even without players, the DM continued playing by himself, and would update us occasionally on how his DMPC raised the dead god, married the elf queen, slayed the devil king, and brought peace to the nation. Good for him, I guess. The game only lasted about 8 sessions or so, but the mental trauma will scar me for eternity. We no longer speak to him for unrelated reasons, and hopefully he has moved on to just writing fanfiction, as it was clearly his intention all along. TLDR, DM runs campaign, becomes railroad tycoon, and won't even let players roll dice. End of story. Insert man playing with himself joke here. Dude, what? My guy is literally out here giving updates on a D&D game he's playing alone. Man put a bag of dog shit in the microwave, and when people got sick of being served feces, he just shrugged his shoulders and said, "Oh well, more for me." I mean, I've heard how far up their own ass some people can be, but this is actually psychotic. What makes it even worse is that this guy wasn't even pushing the players around for the sake of forcing a specific narrative to work. This guy's story was just a bunch of random events and characters coming and going at nauseating speed to fill the express purpose of saying different versions of you to the players. There are Sonic the Hedgehog fan fictions written with more coherency than this crap. The fact that Roy and OP were able to last for 8 sessions is wild to me. You're not even a player at that point, you're an audience, and the show you're watching isn't even good. The cold reality is that we're all gonna die one day, and time is our most valuable asset. So do yourself a favor and don't waste it on wannabe novelists masquerading as dungeon masters. I'm happy to see that you and Roy came to your senses and booted yourselves from DM's game before booting him from your life. I know that losing a friend is hard, but I wouldn't feel too bad about it though. Between his pretentious certainty of his own superiority and his complete inability to write a coherent thought, it's only a matter of time before Kotaku or IGN shows up to offer him a job. Rule number 1, dear viewer, never pass up the opportunity to dunk on game journalists. And on that note, how about we take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake? This week's fan art comes from an anonymous viewer and depicts a new species of reptile, inspired by Larry's vindictive, albeit creative interpretation of my divine form. May you all gaze upon its majesty and bask in the utter fear of the ketchup gecko. Alright, get the bulldozers powered up so we can clear the area.
Wait, you can't. This rainforest is home to the endangered ketchup gecko. It feeds on the naturally produced cringe found only in this ecosystem.
Hey hippie, you're blocking my sun. Cold-blooded Sigmas ain't got time to deal with you beta cuck warm bloods. So, we're gonna go ahead and rev up the bulldozer.
Oh, absolutely. This thing needs to die like yesterday.
Take a shower while you're at it. Thank you again, Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous User, for submitting your art. If you'd like to see your fan art featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section, along with any social media you'd like for me to credit. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can inspire artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and send in your fan art. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, my Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.